welcome to another video to learn about the wonderful world of Latin and what comforts were at ancient entertainment venues. Now, my curiosity about this started when a student asked if spectators could buy food and drink at the circus. As this question stuck with me and I looked more into it, I found the evidence for this question is not entirely clear since ancient authors did not focus on the spectator's experience, or the evidence has since disappeared. So here's what I've been able to find about what people had to make their experiences at the theater, circus, or amphitheater more comfortable. First, let's talk about seating and structures. During the Republic, most theaters and amphitheaters were temporary, or spectators sat at the steps of the temple for the gods honored with the plays or fights. Therefore, the arrangement changed often, and some people thought it would be better if spectators did not even sit. Others offered an awning or little channels of water to help manage the heat. The Circus Maximus, though, was open to the sun. During the imperial period at the permanent stone theaters, the seats were also under the sun. Vitruvius tells us that porticos are good to have near the theater so that people could avoid the rain. On a day with excessive heat, according to Cassius Dio, Caligula moved theatrical performances into an enclosed building to avoid the sun. Dio also states that senators started sitting on cushions to increase comfort and wearing hats to avoid the sun. With the advent of the imperial period, there came assigned seating based on legal and social status, age, marital status, and gender. Within the larger venues like the Colosseum, there were also seats reserved for specific guilds and social clubs. These seats were comparable in size to modern seats, but were larger for the wealthier people. The seats closer to the front, of course, also had a greater ability to see and hear the spectacles, as well as to be seen, another important part for the social, financial, and political elites. To provide more comfort for the spectators, some imperial amphitheaters and theaters were outfitted with an awning as shown on this relief from the tomb of the Hetairai and a fresco featuring the amphitheater in Pompeii. Ovid's poem, The Art of Love, provides the best overall description of what might happen while watching a circus race, gladiatorial fight, or theater show. People may sit very close to each other since there were few armrests separating seats. There might be conversation between audience members who might be a bit too intent on charming their neighbor and who favor and or bet on certain horses, charioteers, gladiators, types of charioteers, or actors. There may be dust in the air or spectators' legs jabbing into one's back from the row behind. To alleviate some of the discomfort, cushions and fans are mentioned as if they're commonplace. One could even bring a stool to keep one's feet off the possibly dirty floor. Second, what about food and drinks? There is a little evidence for people eating in the stands. Cassius Dio tells us that in 59 CE, Nero threw balls with tokens into the stands so that people could exchange them for food, horses, slaves, gold, silver, clothing, etc. Based on similar events during the reigns of Titus and Domitian, the spectators had to take these tokens elsewhere to obtain their prizes. Tokens were also dropped down, as Marshall suggests, during circus games associated with the triumph. Similarly, at a Saturnalia feast held in the Colosseum by Domitian, fruits, nuts, and pastries were dropped down into the stands. Marshall and Statius suggest these foods, tokens, and even birds fell from a linea dives, a rich rope, which has plausibly been understood as similar to the hammock-like contraption shown in this Pompeian wall painting. It is unclear how often this linea dives would have been used. The historian Cassius Dio tells a few more anecdotes about games held at the Colosseum in 192 CE because he was an eyewitness to the unorthodox behavior of the Emperor Commodus. One day, Commodus was tired from slaughtering beasts, so he took some wine from a woman so that he could recover some energy. For a woman to be this close to the emperor in the arena, she would most likely have been a servant or from the upper classes, so this anecdote may not be the most representative for the standard audience member. Indeed, at another point in these games, Commodus tried to strike fear in the heart of senators. To hide their laughter at the threat, Cassius Dio and other senators began chewing laurel sprigs from nearby garlands. This is somewhat ambivalent evidence. Chewing would look weird if food were not consumed by the wealthy at the arena, but the senators did not have food to chew. Given the relatively little evidence regarding people eating in the stands, we should consider the logistics of getting food and drink to spectators. Many ancient theaters, circuses, or amphitheaters have not been studied in anywhere near as much detail as the Colosseum, so I will focus my considerations on that building. The plan of the Colosseum makes it possible that food could have been sold from temporary stalls within the building. There is room for shops in many places among the stairways and passageways, facilitating movement of spectators to their seats. Of course, food could just as easily be sold by vendors wandering the stands or people bringing food in from outside. Indeed, at the aforementioned Saturnalia celebration, a multitude of servers brought bread, wine, and other foods through the seating areas to the people dining there. At another feast under Domitian, food was brought to people in the stands and wine was flowing in many places. There were indeed fountains in the Colosseum. An estimated 44 fountains provided water on the ground floor, and the fountains on the upper floor seem to have been taken out of use at some point in antiquity. Therefore, people were certainly able to consume water at the games in the Colosseum, but it is less clear whether there were such opportunities in other venues where we have less archaeological evidence. It is also unclear to what extent we should interpret these anecdotes as evidence for how frequently people consumed food and drink at the games. Domitian's feast, like the games and plays, were gifts and benefactions for the Roman people. Ancient authors were aware that feeding and entertaining tens of thousands of people was very expensive, and the authors associated the feasts and games with expense. Would that expense make them less common? Among the anecdotes, we learn that in Commodus's reign, a unique woman had wine, but senators did not have food. About 2 centuries earlier, Ovid does not mention buying food for someone in order to charm them at the games, although his later advice about charming people at a feast may hold true for people at the games. Valerius Maximus mentions skepticism about letting spectators be comfortable enough to sit, and this skepticism is remembered by Tacitus. The skepticism was motivated by an aversion to weakness in Romans. Furthermore, I suspect we hear about the linea dives because of its novelty and uniqueness at the end of the 1st century when it was first used, but it is unclear if it continued in use. A lot of questions remain. What about eating and drinking before the games, like at a tailgating party? Feasts were often held in association with gladiatorial games or triumphs, and it is quite possible that the animals killed in the arena were served or given out as part of the feast. Indeed, Marshall's comments about the tokens falling from the linea dives suggest that some were meat from animals killed in the beast hunts. So food was also given out in association with some of the games. There is further possible evidence for a tailgating-like setup in Pompeii. As suggested by Vitruvius, many theaters or amphitheaters were placed near porticos or large open spaces. In Pompeii, the so-called quadriporticus is next to the theater and small theater or odeon, and the amphitheater is next to the grande palestra or campus. The campus was somewhat similar to the early functions of the Campus Martius in Rome. It was a place for exercise, and a swimming pool offered a place to swim like in the river Tiber. The Pompeian campus also had a shrine associated with emperor worship. On the walls of the southern portico, among many other graffiti, were 2 food lists with prices. They list wine, cheese, oil, lard, bread, and chicken for similar prices to each other and is known elsewhere in Pompeii. The first could be a price list, and the second includes how much money was taken in a single day, 1 denarius, so it is likely a record of sales. Given the limited evidence here, it is hard to tell if this food stall or stalls were successful or even what time of year they operated. Along the same wall of the campus colonnade was another common amenity for spectacles, a public latrine. There was a forica here and another in the Quadriporticus in Pompeii. At Rome and the Colosseum, there was a latrine that seems to have been reserved for senators. The theater of Pompey also had at least one latrine. In conclusion, there is some evidence for improving the comfort of stone seats, consuming food at or near the entertainment venues, and relieving oneself near the venue. Of course, how common each of these amenities were remains unclear. This is a common problem with trying to answer questions about Roman spectacles, in a way that is unsurprising since most writings about ancient Roman entertainment are the scripts of plays or comments about the charioteers, animal hunters, gladiators, or even the emperor watching the games. Thank you.